Love it. Okay, so we're going to be talking tonight about a topic that I have actually spoken to probably over 10,000 students in this country, some in other countries about, and that is how to use metacognition to really ace your courses. And so during the course of the presentation, we're going to be talking about strategies, we're going to be talking about some ideas. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand and participate. Now, as you heard, I was at Cornell University, and I was also at Louisiana State University. And when I was there, director of the Learning Center, we actually won the Outstanding Learning Center in the Nation Award because of the strategies that we taught students. And you're going to see some of the scores that they were making before they started using these strategies and the scores they were making afterwards. And but I wanted to show you that your learning center here, the Academic Enhancement Center, is a wonderful center, and I think they will be very competitive for that award. I'm going to be meeting with them tomorrow and suggesting that they apply for that. But how many people here have used the services for the Academic Enhancement Center? Okay, not too many students. If you have not, I urge you to use their services. They have individual consultations, they have tutorial centers, and on their website it very clearly states that it's not just for first-year students, it's not just for students who might be struggling. At Learning Centers, what we do is we talk to students about how to be more efficient in learning, no matter what stage you are. So the strategies are good for now, they're good for graduate school. I talked to quite a few people before I started who were pre-vet or pre-physical therapy or education majors, and so no matter what you're going to go into, these strategies are very helpful, and your learning center here can give you a lot of those. Because you don't have any different strategies, you're doing the same thing. And so this is what was happening to Travis. And so he said that when he got to the test, he would read the questions on the test, and he knew that he had read that stuff, but he couldn't remember it well enough to answer the questions that he had to answer on the test. And so I actually went to a summer workshop to learn reading strategies because there were so many students at LSU coming to me saying that they were having trouble remembering what they read. And I was a chemistry professor. I didn't know how to teach people how to read. So I went to this workshop, and this is what I learned, which I taught Travis, which I'm going to teach you. As we said, the problem that people don't get a lot out of their reading is because they start to read and their mind starts to wander. So the way to prevent that, what I learned was the way to prevent that is use the way the brain likes to work. And the way the brain likes to work is it likes to have a big picture of what it's about to learn. If it has an overview, if it has the big picture, and then it gets individual details to put in that big picture, it's much more efficient at learning the information than it would be if it just started out reading, getting the individual details, and is trying to make its own big picture. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, so you want to give your brain the big picture before you even start to read. And so the way you give your brain the big picture is you look at the boldface print, the italicized words, any charts or graphs, so you know what the information is going to be about. So the first thing is give yourself that big picture, but cut it down into small sections. Only do like about maybe 2 or 3 pages at most. Get the big picture of that information, but then come up with questions that you want the reading to answer for you. So let's say if I were reading a chapter in psychology on reinforcement, I might see positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement highlighted. And so my brain would come up with the question, well, I wonder what this thing is going to say is the difference between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So now I'm reading to get the answers to the questions that I've come up with based on the boldface print. Are you with me? That makes sense? Okay, and so then when you start to read, and this is really important, when you start to read, just read for the first paragraph, just one paragraph. Read that paragraph, stop, and put that information in your own words. Paraphrase it in your own words, and then read the second paragraph and stop and put that information in your own words and try to fold in what was in the first paragraph. Mistake that he was making, and this was the same mistake that Dana was making, and I want to see if anybody else ever made this mistake, because unfortunately I did this when I was in college. Okay, what he was doing is when he had the homework problems, and raise your hand if you've ever done this, where you have a homework set that you've got to do, how many people have ever read a homework problem and then flipped back in the chapter to see an example of the problem that you have to work and use the example to work the problem. If you ever did that, raise your hand. Ah, okay. That, believe it or not, is the number one reason that most people who have the ability to make A's in their math, science, chemistry, physics courses, instead of making A's, they're making D's and sometimes even F's. And the reason is this: when we looked at the example, were we working the problem? What was working the problem? What was working the problem? The book, yeah, the example, the book was working the problem. But, and you guys are very, very bright. If you were not really smart, you wouldn't be here. And so if you're like me, when I looked at the example and saw what had been done, what went through my mind is, oh, yeah, I understand that. Do you remember thinking that when you, okay, oh, yeah, I understand that. But then when we got to the test, what happened? Uh-oh, yeah, because if they change it up a little bit, if it's not exactly like the example, then we don't know what to do. And so that is a problem. So if you've ever done that, I want you to, from now on, don't do that. But I'm going to tell you what to do instead of doing that. Okay, when you are going to do a problem, before you look at the first problem, if you have a homework set to do, before you look at the first problem, study the information. Study it as if you're going to have a test or a quiz on it the next day. You know, you focus in more if you're preparing for a test or a quiz. Study it really intently. And when you're studying, you're going to come across examples, whether you're using your notes or the book. You're going to come across examples. And what do you do now when you get to an example if you're using either your notes or the book? And you can be very honest with me. What do you do when you get to examples? Skip it. Yes, I'm hearing people say skip it. Now, actually, I was surprised to hear that because I never skipped the examples. I always read the example. But all over the country now, students are telling me that they skip the examples. Well, I want you to promise yourself that you will never skip another example, because the examples are your brain's best resource for determining that it can work the problem. Because, see, what the professor is testing on an exam or a quiz is, can a student look at a problem they have never seen before? Can they start it, go all the way through it, and finish it without making a single mistake? Well, nobody on the planet could do that if you haven't practiced that skill. And your homework is really the only chance you have to practice that before you get to the test. And so never skip another example. What I want you to do is study the information, and then when you get to an example, just read the problem statement and work the problem, work the example on your own. Just work it based on what you've studied. And even if you're not sure what to do next, just power your way through it until you get to an answer. You can pretend that it's on a test if you want to. You got to get to an answer. And then when you get to an answer, compare your answer with the answer that is in the book. Now, if you got the same answer, then you can look. But if you didn't get the same answer, I don't want you to look yet. I want you to try to figure out where your mistake was. And I can ask you, at this point in the process, do you think making a mistake is good or bad? Good, absolutely. Okay, and see, and this is what the changes now that we have to make to ace everything. If you stay in learn mode and not study mode, and if you prepare as if you've got to teach the information and actually go over that, then you're going to find that your grades and your performance really will skyrocket. So basically, to ace those courses, stay in learn mode and study as if you've got to teach the information. And so that's where metacognition comes in. And metacognition is just a term that was coined by a cognitive psychologist back in 1979. And it's just your ability to think about your own thinking. It's kind of like if you imagined you had a big brain outside your brain looking at what your brain is doing. And that big brain is saying, is she really understanding this information so that she could teach it to someone, or did she just memorize it the night before the test? It's saying, if she's got a paper that's due 3 weeks from now, does she know that she's got to start on it now, looking at what topics to consider, or is she planning to just do it the night before? It is saying, if she has a homework set due, does she realize that she needs to start on it early? Because getting back to that homework strategy with the problems, when do most people start doing their homework that they have to turn in? Okay, the night before, somebody said, yeah. And the problem is this: if you're doing it the night before, what is your main goal at that point? Just get her done. Exactly. Just get her done. Just get it done. And if you're in get her done mode, you're not going to be able to make yourself use the strategies because it takes a little bit longer. So what you're going to have to do is whenever the problem set is given, try to do 2 or 3 problems a night so that you're working up to doing the whole thing. And so it's your ability not just to think about your own thinking, but to be consciously aware of yourself as a problem solver. So you know that any situation that comes up, you can generate strategies for how to solve that particular problem. And so here at Concordia, your biggest problem is how do I ace all my courses? And so then that metacognitive brain gets to work and it says, okay, well, what do you need to do? Well, you need to know the syllabi very well. You need to know the professors. You need to be able to make sure that you know exactly what is required in every course. And so you start to put in process problem-solving strategies that you wouldn't be doing if you were not using your metacognitive brain. And it's not just your ability to monitor your thought processing, but you can control what you're doing. So if you have a problem with just putting things off until it's too late, that metacognitive brain says, well, we need to come up with a schedule. So you come up with some way to address all the problems that you would have had before. And then finally, to be aware of the type of learning that you're doing. How many people have had the experience where, you know, you studied and studied for a test, but then you got there and the test wasn't anything at all like you expected? That ever happened? Okay, and so what happens in that situation very often is the level that professors are testing at many times is very, very different than the level that you were tested at high school. And there's no way for you to even know that there's another level out there. But we're going to talk about where those levels come from and how to make sure that you're studying at the right level. So I want to do a little exercise with you now. And I want to see how accurately you can count the vowels that are going to be on the next slide. I'm going to give you 45 seconds to count them. And if you finish before 45 seconds are up, I want you to just go back and check and make sure that you've done them accurately. But we all have to finish at 45 seconds, so I'll give you the 5-second warning before 45 seconds. So everybody ready to start counting vowels? Okay, so let's start counting the vowels now. Five seconds. And stop. Okay, now I want to know how many of the words or phrases from the previous slide you remember. Okay? And we'll see. Okay, and if you're like most groups, not many. Now, there were 15 words on the slide, and did anybody remember more than 10? Okay, so raise your hand when I get to the number you did remember. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, so it looked like the average was probably about 3. And there are 15 words on the slide, and so 3 out of 15 is what percent for my math people out there? Somebody said not good. It's 20%. What letter grade is 20%? F. Okay, I call it an F minus. It's the kind of F that's hard to raise out of the F range. Okay, but I'm going to ask you to look at the words again. And if you look at them from top to bottom, you're going to find that they are arranged according to something. And so if you see what they're arranged according to, then just yell it out. Exactly. They're arranged according to numbers. Dollar bill for 1, dice, tricycle, 4-leaf clover, hand, 6-pack, 7-Up, etc. Okay? And so now that we know what the words are organized according to, I'm going to give you 45 seconds now to memorize the words, and then I'm I'm going to, after I say time's up, I want you to just close your eyes and silently recite the words to yourself to see how many you remember, and then open your eyes when you think you've remembered as many as you're going to remember, okay? So let's start memorizing the words now. Five seconds. And stop. Okay, so just close your eyes and silently recite them to yourself, and open your eyes when you think you've remembered as many as you're going to remember. Wow, you guys were fast. It seems like everybody's finished. Did you do better that time? Okay, let's see how we did as a group, the average. Okay, and that last time our average was 3, so I will start at 4. Raise your hand when I get to the number you remembered. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow. Okay, so it looked like the average that time was probably about 14. And I saw some people kicked in at like, 7 or 8 or 9. And if you got 1 or 2 the first time, then that still means that you did 3 or 4 times better the second time than the first time, which means that if this were a testing situation, if you had a 20 on the first test, 4 times better is an 80. And so the point of this exercise is we are not any smarter people in the room than we were 3 minutes ago when the average as a group was 20% and F minus. And 14 out of 15 is 93%. So just as you could go, we as a group could go from an F minus to an A in 3 minutes, you can do the same thing in your classes. And you're not even starting out at 20%. Many people have. Okay, so this is Bloom's taxonomy. It is just a hierarchy of learning levels. Now, actually, there are 2 versions of it. This is the original version. There's a revised version now where the levels are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and the top 2 are reversed, so evaluating and then creating is at the top. But I find that it really doesn't make that much difference as long as you know that there are different levels of learning, where at the very bottom is just straight memorization. If I were to memorize that a buffer solution is a solution that resists a change in pH, I'm at knowledge. Now, if somebody says, okay, well, yeah, that's fine, but tell me what that means in your own words. If I can't do that, I'm still at knowledge. But if I could put that in my own words, if I could explain it to my 80-year-old grandmother or my 8-year-old nephew, then I'm at comprehension. If I can use that information to solve problems, answer questions I've never seen before, then I would be at application. If I could give a 3-minute mini lecture on buffer solutions, talk about weak acids, the salt of weak acids, Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, if I could do that for 3 minutes without stumbling, now I'm at analysis. If I could come up with my own theories, my own ideas of how to do things, then I'm at synthesis. And if I could decide whether one buffer system is better for one environment than another, then I'm at evaluation. And so let me ask you guys, if you think back to high school, and you can kind of just yell out the level, what would you say is the level that you typically had to work to get A's and B's in high school? No right or wrong answers. Just yell out what you think it was. Okay, I'm hearing people say knowledge. How many people would say if you were good memorizers in high school, you did pretty well? Okay. How many people would say that they need to be at comprehension? Okay. Application. Okay. Analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Okay. And but in college here, so many people were either at knowledge or comprehension or application. But here at Concordia, to make the A's that everybody is capable of doing, what do you think is the minimum level you would have to consistently operate at in order to make A's in your college classes? You just yell it out. Analysis, absolutely, everybody. And that's, we're talking minimum. We're talking, yeah, analysis is being minimum because you have to understand all those concepts. You've got to be able to teach that information. You have to understand it that well. And so that's the good news. That's how so many people went from making F's to A's, because when they got to college, they were at the lower levels, but they understood that they needed to be at the higher levels. And so then the question is, how do you move yourself from lower levels to higher levels? Well, I call it the magic bullet because this thing just works. And we call it the study cycle. And I can guarantee you that if you start implementing these steps, if you do it on a consistent basis, you're going to find that you will be doing, even if you're making A's in your classes now, you're going to make them more easily because you're going to be keeping up with everything that's in your classes. And so the first step in this is to preview the information that's going to be covered in class before you go to class. And what that does is it gives your brain that preview so that it knows what's coming, it knows when it gets the details, it knows where to put that stuff in. And you can do that by looking at the bold-faced print, the italicized words, any charts or graphs in the section that the professor is going to cover in class that day. And during the preview, come up with questions that you want the lecture to answer for you. So let's say if we were in physics and you were doing a chapter, and let's say velocity and acceleration were two of the bold-faced words. And then you might say, well, I wonder what they are going to say is the difference between velocity and acceleration. So you give your brain a purpose for going to lecture. So do the preview. And then the second step is to go to class. Go to class, go to class. You got to be at every class. And you have to be there, not just in body, but in mind. And let me congratulate you guys. This is really amazing. Most times when I talk to groups of students this large, at least 5 or 10 people are on their phones, or some people are on their computers, on the web, looking up stuff. And I just know that the people with their computers open now, they're taking notes on this stuff. They're not surfing the web. And so, and this is what you would have to do when you go to class. That you're going to, and if you've done the previewing, then you can stay with the lecturer. If they ask questions, you can answer those questions. You can come up with your own questions because you would be that familiar with it. Some students tell us that it's really helpful for taking notes. If they've done the previewing, they find it so much easier to take notes because they know what things they have to really pay close attention to and take extensive notes, and what things they pretty much understand. So do the preview, go to class. And then the third step is to review what happened in class, what was covered in class. Review that as soon after class as possible. And the reason that's so important is this. When you hear something for the first time or you see something for the first time, what part of memory does it go into? Short-term or long-term? Short-term. It goes into short-term memory. And if you don't do something to move it into long-term memory, it's not going to be accessible to you. That's why many times, if you don't look at the lecture notes until you pull them out the night before the test, you don't even remember hearing that stuff when you heard it in lecture because it went in short-term memory. You didn't do anything to move it to long-term memory, and so it's just not accessible. And so it's important to review the information and start the process of moving it from short-term to long-term memory. But it also has this impact. How many people here have ever seen a movie, any movie, more than one time? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, how many people have noticed that the second time around, you see things that you didn't even know were there the first time around? Have you noticed that? Okay, it's exactly the same thing with class. When you go to class, your brain your brain hears all of it, but you're not really cognizant of it necessarily because you're taking notes and you might miss some stuff. But then when you go over and review your notes, your brain is going to see stuff that it didn't even see the first time around. And when the test is written, the professor writes the test expecting you to know what was in the third time that you saw the movie. And if you only just kind of slept through the previews, then you're going to end up making C's or worse on tests that you could make A's on. And so that review is going to help out a lot. Now, but now if you do it correctly, it only takes about 10 minutes to do the preview and only about 10 minutes to do the review. So you do have to do more than that. You have to do what we call intense study sessions. And these are arranged also. It's important to take a minute or so to set a goal. Set a goal for what you want to accomplish. Because if you don't set a goal, then you might find yourself, as I used to do, I would start one thing, and then I'd think about, oh, I need to do something else. And then I'd go to do something else, like, oh, but I got to do this. And so I'd flip back and forth, and pretty soon 45 minutes had passed, and I really hadn't gotten anything accomplished. And so take a minute to decide if you want to preview for a class, if you want to do 3 homework sets, homework problems, if you want to read a chapter, but set the goal. And then for the next 30 to 50 minutes, study with focus and action. Turn off the cell phone, turn off the Instagram, and just focus in because you want to give your brain the opportunity to be extremely efficient. And we say, you know, you can do this. Some students say, well, I don't really have 30 minutes I can do this. Even if you have 20-minute break, set a goal for a minute, study for 12 minutes, and then review for 3 minutes. So whenever you have those little snippets of time, you can get this in. And, but don't go any longer than about 75 minutes because your brain actually does get tired and it gets less efficient even though you might not be aware of it. And so you're kind of wasting time if you're doing these 3-hour marathons because you're not being efficient. So always stop, take a break, and then come back and do another one. And what we recommend is if you can do 2 or 3 of these during daylight hours and maybe another 1 or 2 at night, you will have studied 4 or 5 hours in that one day, where most people don't study 4 or 5 hours in a week. And when you do it that way, you're learning the information as the course is going along, and it makes a huge difference. Okay, and so again, some of the effective metacognitive strategies always solve problems without looking at a solution. How many people have ever gotten to a test where you missed a question because the professor told you you need to memorize this, and you thought you had memorized it, but you forgot it when you got to the test? That ever happened? Yeah, so you really want to concentrate on making sure you've memorized everything that you were told to memorize. Always ask how, what, if, do those mini lectures, use the study cycle, go to tutoring sessions on a regular basis, but go to tutoring not with the idea that you're going to get the tutor to show you how to do stuff. Go to tutoring with the idea that you're going to explain what you've done to the tutor, because it's the work that you do yourself that's going to allow you to really ace your courses. And then the last thing on this one is aim for 100% mastery, not 90%. And the reason I say that, and I'll ask you, do you study differently if you are aiming for 100% than if you're aiming for 90%? Okay, what's one thing you do different?